Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I had a whole bunch of people send me this story. When I first saw the headline, I honestly thought it was a joke, like a Snopes story or an Onion story or a Babylon Bee story. And then I saw a couple more across. I noticed they're from different news outlets. And so I actually went and I Googled the story just to see where it all popped up. And it popped up at a bunch of legitimate news sites. So the headline is, Connecticut couple alleges the state is illegally filming their property with a camera attached to a bear. It's a drone bear. The bear is allegedly wearing a camera placed on it by the state, and the couple says that it was done so that their property could get filmed surreptitiously. And, why get a drone? Those things are expensive. Get a bear. The story is from CT Insider. Jordan Nathaniel Fenster wrote it. A Connecticut couple alleges the state put a camera on a bear with the intention of illegally filming their property and has filed an injunction to get the photographic evidence destroyed. And so you might ask, is this even possible? Well, actually, it's very possible. Small cameras now have gotten really small and really good in terms of what they'll record. And so it's quite possible that you could mount a camera on a bear and it would, see things and record things or broadcast things, depending on how it's connected to something else. And then the bear just does whatever the bear does out in the woods. No one knows what they do out there, but maybe this camera will help us find out. But the couple says the State Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, or DEEP, put a camera on a bear that the agency knew goes onto this couple's property. They've got a 117-acre forested piece of property in Heartland. Couple's lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court alleges a violation of their Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches of their property. DEEP is responsible for monitoring bear activity in the state and has increasingly been called in to remove problem animals. DEEP officials did not immediately respond to comment, and the couple says, we're not asking for money. We're not asking for attorney fees. We're just asking for an injunction to make them stop. And that's the attorney speaking on their behalf. This is the latest salvo in a years-long dispute between the couple and the town of Heartland, which claims that the couple had been illegally feeding the bears. According to a request for an injunction filed last month, a bear with an identifying tag and a camera came onto the couple's property earlier in May. It's a bear that the couple had seen before. He noticed that the bear now had not just an ear tag, but a collar. And so he got on his camera and zoomed in on the bear. And not only did it have a collar, but the collar had a camera on it. That's a bear that the DEEP knows is a frequenter of the property. So what does this say to me? That says to me they're engaging in a warrantless search of his property. Now, this is an interesting question. I did a video recently about drone overflights of property and whether or not the entity doing the overflight on behalf of the government would need to get a warrant to use that information gathered as evidence in court. There's a fight on that in Michigan. However, you got a camera on a bear and the bear's wandering around. Let's assume that the bear actually behaves naturally. It's not been trained to go in and observe things. And the question is, why is there a camera on the bear? Now, I've seen documentaries on television about the life of animals, and they filmed some of them by putting cameras on the animals. And it's a potential argument that the camera on the bear has been put there so they can study the behavior of the bear. And now that might be a legitimate interest of the State Department that oversees bears in Connecticut. Especially if they got problems with problem bears. That's how you find out what the problem bear does in its spare time. So the question then becomes, let's say they've got a legitimate argument as to why they put cameras on bears. And they say, we're not doing it to spy on people. We're doing it to, in essence, spy on the bear. Now, here's the thing. It might be that a court could say, we're going to leave the camera on the bear, but anything it gathers might not be admissible in court. Depends on what it gathers. But you're going to get into a gray area. I've mentioned before the concept of plain view. Plain view. So if the police are someplace, and I'm talking about just law enforcement in general, is someplace they're legally allowed to be, even if it's with a warrant that says you can go in and look for this one thing, if on their way in to look for this one thing, there's something else laying right there that's a violation of the law, well, it's still something they can respond to because it's in their plain view. There's nothing intrusive about them simply averting their eyes or looking over here, okay? And the courts have said that. So an argument could be made down the road that the bear was just wearing a camera so we could watch where it goes, how it feeds, what it does in its spare time. We're studying the bears so we can learn better how to keep them from becoming problem bears. And oh, by the way, as it was wandering through this piece of property, it filmed something that when we saw it, we realized, oh, there's illegal activity going on back here. Then the question is that admissible? Because I suspect that Deep is going to be able to say, we've got a legitimate reason to put a camera on a bear. It's got nothing to do with law enforcement or investigating crimes. So there's the gray area. Because if the camera is legally on the bear and it films something, there you go. So now the couple is saying, we don't even want to get into that argument. Therefore, we want an injunction right now saying they cannot put a camera on a bear on our property. The question becomes, is that the case? So the attorney says it's like sending in a robot, I guess, with a camera on. And you can't do that without getting a warrant. Well, there's a little difference there because a robot presumably would be something you could control. I don't believe the bear could be trained to go in and, maybe it could be trained hypothetically, okay, like a circus bear. But let's face it, in this situation, the bear is most likely not trained and it's probably doing whatever it does. So when asked if he believed that Deep had intentionally affixed the camera to that specific bear, knowing it would enter this specific property, the attorney said yes. What they do have on some of the bears with collars is GPS devices so they can track where they are. I understand that's part of wildlife management, but never were there cameras. And it's a little difficult to understand the point of a camera. What would that do? Well, unfortunately, I've got to explain this, I guess. The attorney's got to think a little harder because cameras can accomplish a legitimate purpose of the people who oversee the interactions in that area between people and bears. So, meanwhile, the landowner had previously been accused in a lawsuit filed by the town of Heartland of feeding the bears in violation of a town ordinance. The man is a part owner. The owner also runs Nature Havens, which asks guests to pay a fee for a chance of seeing wildlife, including bears. During several public hearings in 2020, local residents claimed that the man and others were feeding wildlife in order to attract them to the property. But of course, the man denies that. He made a statement in 2020 to Fox 61. It is unfortunate that this issue is being motivated by a few neighbors who don't understand the facts. Heartland later claimed in court that the man and others associated with the business had illegally fed bear cubs. And again, they denied those allegations. A cease and desist order was filed, which the town said the man was caught on tape violating. And by tape, I assume they mean video. So there's more to the story, but I'm going to stop there. But this really does boil down to, number one, is there really a camera on the bear? I believe some people were skeptical about that claim, but of course, when they come into court, the judge is going to turn right away to the Deep attorney and say, is there a camera on that bear? Yes or no? If yes, next question, why was it placed there? Why? Why is there a camera on a bear? And there's a good chance they're going to say, well, we put cameras on a lot of bears. We've got 25 bear cams out there right now. I don't know. And so that's a possibility. So if they have a legitimate purpose for doing it and they can demonstrate that they've done this in other places, for instance, and gathered useful information, the judge might say, well, that's a legitimate use of a camera on a bear, regardless of where the bear wanders. And then the question becomes, well, what happens if that bear were to record somebody or something on that property that caused law enforcement to go, ooh, wait a second, now that's interesting. And so you're going to wind up pretty much with the same argument you had with the drone overflights with the code enforcement people, because it sounded like the issue here with the municipality of Heartland actually saying that there's some violations they thought of the law. And the question is, were those criminal violations or were they civil violations? Get into that argument. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But that's going to be the issue. Is there a camera on the bear? If the camera is on the bear, why is it there? And then if there's a legitimate reason for it to be there, the judge is probably going to say, I would think, well, that's what you guys do. You guys can do that. And then the attorney for the landowner is going to say, but yes, Your Honor, but what happens if they see something on the video that they think should be turned over to law enforcement? And that can go either way. And I suspect a judge is most likely going to say, well, if they saw something on their camera and the camera had every legal right to be there because it was placed on the neck of a bear so the bear could be filmed doing what it does, there's a good chance it's going to fall under the equivalent of a plain view kind of doctrine. So we'll see what happens, but it's a fascinating story, if for no other reason than the fact that they're alleging that there's a bear cam out there. It's a camera on a bear on their property. So from CT Insider, Jordan Nathaniel Fenster wrote that. Connecticut couple alleges state is illegally filming their property with a camera attached to a wandering bear. Questions or comments, put them below those. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. I haven't been everywhere, but it's on my list.